Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Dear Goddess. I am Kel Karuna, transformation coach, spiritual mentor, somatic healer, best-selling author, international speaker, and human, because I am right here on this journey with you, navigating the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs and sharing all of it with you. As I was feeling into what I felt called to share in this week's episode, I was actually feeling blank as fuck. And if you've been listening to the show, you know that I am in a season of transition. Maybe you are in this season as well, because there are seasons in life. We have seasons of expansion and seasons of contraction and seasons of change and seasons in between timelines. And that's very much where I am right now. I left Bali, where I was living for the past 2.5 years, currently living in fucking suburbia with my family, really questioning my sanity, if I'm quite honest. I think I mentioned in the last episode how I'm like, it always seems like a good idea to spend like a month with family because I haven't seen them in so long and I want to spend time with family. And then I'm spending time with family and I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? Yeah, I would be lying if I said this has been an easy transition for me. And it's definitely a transition because in just a couple of weeks, I actually need to buy my flight today. I'm going to be making another move to somewhere new and beginning a new chapter, but this has been a challenging season for me. I've done so much inner child healing work. I've done so much work relating to healing the father wounds and the mother wounds, and yet I am feeling more triggered than ever. A past version of myself would have been triggered by feeling more triggered, which that just does not sound like a party that I really want to be at because we're basically judging ourselves for not being more healed or whatever the fuck that means. But really, being triggered isn't a bad thing. It might not feel that good in the moment, but it's just showing you a part of you that's still holding on to something from the past. And the deeper you go in your journey, the more that you get to the nitty gritty shit because this journey, it's a spiral. It goes in and down and it becomes more narrow and the ego also gets sneakier and sneakier the deeper in that you go. But we are going to have a powerful conversation today that was inspired by what I'm moving through right now. But as I was reflecting on what I wanted to share and talk about in this episode, I was kind of feeling frustrated because I was just drawing a blank. I have not been feeling super creative or inspired, which makes sense in so many ways. I'm not exactly in an environment that is really conducive to my creativity. We talked about this in one of the more recent episodes where we can become a victim to our environment. And I'm still learning how to take my own advice, apparently, because I'm not in an environment that feels particularly inspiring to me, but I'm not doing the things that help open up my creative channel. So I have not been doing things that allow me to connect with my creativity. I haven't been painting. I haven't been dancing. I haven't been singing. I haven't been going out and having new experiences. I've been in this kind of like stagnant place. So it makes sense that I am not feeling super inspired. But one thing I have been doing a lot of lately is crying. Yes. And actually, right before this episode, I just had a full on dance party with myself because I'm like, all right, we need to shift and move some of this energy. I've been doing a lot of somatic practices, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today is navigating emotions and what the fuck it actually means to feel your emotions and some of the things that block us from that. So I'll share the story that inspired this entire episode. So yesterday was a full on family day. I went on a bit of an adventure with my sister and brother in law and niece and two nephews. Just for some context, I am in Washington staying with my parents in their house here. They live here part of the year. They still mostly live in Florida. But my sister lives out here with her family. So brother in law, niece, and two nephews. And then my brother actually now lives out here with his wife, my sister in law, and my niece and two nephews. So I have really enjoyed playing auntie with them and being able to spend time with them because for most of their lives, I've been living in Bali and other places. So I have enjoyed that a lot. So yesterday, I went on a bit of an adventure with my sister and family. And then Sundays have been family dinner days where everyone comes over to my parents' house. My mom cooks and everyone just like eats and hangs out. So everyone's like eating and hanging out. And I'm just feeling emotional as fuck. I am on my cycle. I started on Saturday And also, I did not get adequate sleep on Saturday night. And it's interesting how when we are in these seasons of challenge or seasons that we are moving through change, or perhaps we're really not feeling our best, that's sometimes where we pull back from our self care. And by we, I mean mostly me, but maybe you too. So I've been a little bit lax about my sleep, a little bit lax about my movement and my hydration. Yeah, this isn't about being like, what the fuck is wrong with you, right? It's about noticing. We don't need to create more shame and guilt and heaviness into our current circumstances. We just need to notice it, take responsibility of it, and notice what needs to shift. So for me, staying up a little bit later when I know I have to wake up early the next day, not ideal. That's what happened Saturday night. So Sunday, I woke up after getting like maybe 6 hours of sleep, and my sleep hasn't been great lately. I was definitely feeling it. We can give ourselves a hard time about having a hard time and not necessarily being in full alignment with what we know will really support us, or we can just notice it and choose to change it. And sometimes, too, when we're navigating these challenging seasons, some of the patterns of pulling away from your self care, or maybe you're spending more time on your phone, these are also coping mechanisms. And we can think of them as self sabotage, but really it is this toxic way that our ego and nervous system try to keep us safe because they're trying to help us cope. And sometimes that looks like numbing out and disconnecting. So if you are noticing these patterns within yourself, just notice them, but also remember awareness is only the first step. And we have to go deeper with it or not. But we know what happens if we don't, because we know what the past looks like. And we're just going to be getting more of that if we're not actually making the shifts and changes to come into sovereignty with ourselves. And we're going to be talking more about that, what the fuck that actually means to have sovereignty with yourself, to have sovereignty with your nervous system and your emotions. But anyway, back to the family dinner story. So it's family dinner, and I'm just feeling like I just want to like cry. And I just feel so heavy and I feel so much grief. And I'm looking around and I just can feel so much energy. And I just see so many patterns and dynamics that are present. And I also know it's all just a reflection of me because we're literally just creating our own reality. And I'm just like, fuck, I am feeling so emotional. Like I'm not really having a good time right now. So I kind of like pulled back from it, and I'm in the kitchen and I'm starting to put things away in the dishwasher and just kind of clean up. And I noticed myself fighting back tears, and you never want to fight back tears. I spent most of my life fighting back tears, whether it was in childhood or in the marriage I was in. I think it's pretty self explanatory that when we're fighting back tears, we are suppressing emotions. So I pause because I recognize that I am defaulting to an old pattern of trying to just do things to push through emotions or to play a role of helper or fixer and making things better, and really just bypassing my own emotions. So I stopped loading up the dishwasher and I went in my room and I led myself through a somatic journey. And what the fuck does that mean? It means I went into my body. It means I cried. It means I allowed emotions to move through me. Something amazing happens when you actually do that. You feel better because emotions are meant to be felt. Emotions are energy in motion, which means they are meant to move and they are meant to flow. And when they don't, they become suppressed and stagnant, and they actually will manifest as diseases and illnesses within our body because all of that emotion that we're suppressing creates a lot of density, and that blocks our own life force energy from being able to flow through us. And then what happens is we get triggered and something pokes at something that we've suppressed, and then we react to it. And life is always showing us what we are ready to heal when we can be present in the moment and when we can actually use each moment as a portal and a mirror to see more of ourselves. So this means using triggers as opportunities for healing. And remember that when we are triggered, it's often less about our current circumstances and more about what's being brought up from the past. I gave a different analogy in last week's episode, but for this episode, I'm going to give another analogy because for me, I found all of these concepts so fucking abstract and like I don't quite get it. Like I need some type of visual. So I'm going to use the fishhook visual. You know, a fishhook, they had like the barbs on the end. I actually have a bit of a phobia of fish hooks. Oh, they make me cringe. But we essentially go through life and we have experiences that perhaps are painful or perhaps are challenging or perhaps we don't have the resources to fully navigate them. We have wounding, we have trauma, we are humans having a human experience. And we kind of have all of these like fish hooks stored within our body, not our physical body, our emotional and energetic body. And then what happens is we just like leave the fish hooks hanging out there. And then we go through life and something will poke at them. And it's like, fuck, that hurts. Like, why are you poking me? And it's like, bitch, you have a fish hook in your arm. Like, don't you want to like take that out? And it's like, no, why did you do that to me? What's wrong with you? Why is this happening? Poor me, right? And it's like, sure, but also like, let's take this fucking fish hook out. So when you're triggered, it's showing you these fish hooks. It's showing you these unresolved wounds from the past that are ready to be healed because triggers are just showing you where you are not yet free and where you are ready to be liberated. Now, I used to think that healing meant that you never felt bad emotions. And if you are watching the video, you'll see that I'm using air quotes here. They're kind of fun, the air quotes, because emotions are not good or bad. They just are. Now, emotions, as we now know, are energy, and energy has a frequency. So some emotions have a higher frequency, such as love and happiness and joy and bliss and pleasure. And some emotions have a much lower frequency, like shame and anger and pain and sadness and resentment. But ultimately, it's all neutral. Yeah, some of them are a lot more enjoyable, and our ego has a preference for some of those higher vibe emotions. But at the same time, our soul fucking loves all of it because our soul chose to be a human right now in this lifetime, which, oh my goodness, if you are listening to this show, which you obviously are since you're hearing me, you are a powerful fucking soul because your soul chose to be here in a really pivotal and chaotic point in history for all of these reasons. So you are a fucking warrior, and I'm honored to be on this journey with you. But at the end of the day, our soul loves all of this. And a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul because our soul came here to feel and to evolve and to transcend karmic patterns that it's been holding on to for lifetimes. So the whole experience of being a human is about feeling and emotions because our soul cannot feel them unless it's in this physical form and in this physical body. So emotions are not good or bad. But I used to think that healing meant you never had those bad emotions. You never felt sadness. You never felt angry or shame or unworthy or any of those things. And it was just like, I'm high vibe all the time. And I actually had a major chapter with toxic positivity, probably not shocking. I've had toxic relationships with all kinds of things in my life, including positivity. And I was essentially just gaslighting myself every time I began to feel some type of emotion that I didn't want to feel, whether it was anxiety, which that's less of an emotion and more so a state of your nervous system. But anytime I felt an emotion that was like a bad emotion, I would try to avoid it. I would suppress it. I would try to talk myself out of it. And ultimately, I was just hiding from myself because emotions are meant to be felt. They're meant to be experienced. And we're not really taught how to feel them. We're not really taught how to regulate ourselves and how to be with them. So being high vibe is not about never feeling sad. It's not about never feeling grief or anger. It's about actually feeling it, and you can feel it from a high vibe. Okay, hear me out. So love is one of the highest frequencies that there is, unconditional love, right up there with authenticity. Shame is one of the lowest frequencies that there is. It is just dense as fuck. It's so toxic. And I've done so many quantum healing journeys, not just for myself, with myself, but also for clients. And we've navigated shame together and alchemizing it because shame is what really blocks your own life force energy and your aliveness from moving through you. But shame is super dense and fear is super dense. So when we are experiencing our emotions from a frequency of love and meeting them with compassion, meeting them with curiosity, meeting that with a regulated nervous system, we can actually be high vibe and feel those lower energies in the form of emotions. But when we are meeting those emotions from a place of fear or shame, then that's what's actually keeping us in a lower vibration. So the goal isn't actually to feel better, which is what I used to think. I'm like, I'm just going to feel really good and amazing all the time. I had no idea what the fuck this journey was about. I thought I would just be like flowing around and I'm like, it's all just so blissful and magical. And it is, but you also feel a lot of shit. And sometimes it's painful. And sometimes you feel like you are just in an actual death portal and their ego death. So do you think the ego wants to die? No, no, they fucking resist that shit. But at the same time, our objective is not to kill the ego because then we're just meeting the ego with fear. Our objective is to hold space for the parts of ourselves that are no longer in alignment to be released with love and return to our heart. So the goal isn't to feel better, it's to get better at feeling. And I missed that memo for most of my life. The thing is, the more that you feel, the more that you feel. So I think it's a pretty safe assumption that you want to feel the highest levels of love and pleasure in your life. Like we're talking pleasure where it's like every cell in your body is feeling turned on and orgasmic. And this isn't even related to sexuality. This is just feeling turned on by yourself, by your own energy, by life. In order to feel those levels of pleasure and bliss, you have to be willing to go that low because expansion happens in all directions. So the more grief that you feel, the more sadness that you're able to feel, you're also able to feel more of the pleasure, more of the bliss. But we tend to do this thing where it's like, I only want to feel pleasure. I only want to feel good. And it's like, you can't because if you're blocking and suppressing emotions in one direction, you're also capping yourself in the other direction. And we end up like all contracted. And it's like, why can't I feel good? Because you're using all of your energy to avoid feeling bad. And that energy that you're using to avoid feeling bad is blocking your own life force energy because when we're holding on to all of these emotional wounds in the form of fish hooked and suppressed energy and emotions, that blocks the flow of life force energy through us. And we are just life wanting to experience itself. So the more that you feel, the more that you feel. And if you are listening or watching this show, there's a good chance that you feel a lot. You perhaps may even identify as being an empath, a highly sensitive person, which I certainly do. And being an empath, being highly sensitive is such a gift because, as I mentioned, that is the purpose of life to fucking feel. So, as an empath or a highly sensitive person, depending on which terminology you prefer, it's just semantics, it's all the same thing. We actually have a genetic upgrade to feel. But at the same time, we're not taught about emotional regulation. We're not taught about the nervous system. And we are oftentimes born into families where our caregivers don't necessarily have the same capacity to feel as we do. And they don't know how to feel their emotions. So we come along and we're feeling a lot of shit. We're probably even feeling their emotions and the emotions of the people around us. And we don't know what to do with it. As a child, I felt responsible for the emotions of everyone around me, especially my parents. I felt responsible for their happiness. I felt responsible for their sadness. I felt responsible for all of it. And I made myself responsible to make them happy. I've asked my mom a few times what I was like as a child, and she always comments how sensitive I was. Now, my mom is also extremely sensitive, but I can see how she never had the opportunity to learn how to really be with her emotions in a safe place. So I could see that within her. And I could also see that within her because if you can spot it, you've got it. So my mom has been a really powerful mirror for me to see more of my own patterns and programming and conditioning. But as a child, being highly sensitive growing up, you probably had some experiences where being so emotional and so sensitive had some type of consequence or some type of negative experience. So we learn to shut down and we learn to suppress and we learn to close ourselves off. You could think about it's like you're literally putting armor over your heart because your heart is your emotional center. So every time you suppress emotion, you're literally pushing it down. You probably at this point in life are having some kind of digestive issues because our digestive health is really showing our ability to digest life. And if we're not digesting emotions, we're just suppressing and storing them. And we're disconnecting from our truth. We're disconnecting from our power. We're disconnecting from the gift of our sensitivity. We're disconnecting from our most authentic selves. But it makes sense why we would do that, especially if we didn't have the tools and the resources and we weren't in environments where we could really learn to see and use our emotions and the depths that we can feel as a gift. We probably often felt the emotions of others more than they feel their own. This is something that I still navigate with my parents. So I was talking to my dad the other day, and the beginning of last December, my dad had a very abrupt and unexpected change in his health and subsequently the quality of his life. So he basically woke up one day, December 1st, and had numbness from the waist down. And they initially thought that it was like Guillain-Barre or some weird type of illness or condition that came through. They were thinking it was maybe a side effect from the vaccine, which I'm not still convinced that it wasn't. But overnight, the quality of his life and also my mom's life changed very abruptly. And there hasn't really been a significant improvement in his condition. So imagine one day going to bed feeling like you normally do, and then the next day waking up and not being able to feel the lower half of your body. I don't know about you, but I feel like that would really affect me mentally and emotionally. And I was talking to my dad about it and I asked how he's doing mentally. And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, this is such a typical conversation with my dad, who I'm pretty sure doesn't even know what emotions are. I asked him once, I'm like, "Dad, do you know what emotions are?" And he's like, "No, what are they?" And he was like joking, but also not really. To the sense about blaming my dad. I mean, nobody taught my dad about emotions. So how could he teach me about them or how could he know about them within himself? But I was asking him like how this is impacting him. And he's like, "I don't know. It's is what it is. Like it could be worse." And I'm like, "Yeah, it could be worse." By now, like I'm crying because I can see how it's affecting him and the quality of his life and the quality of my mom's life, who's really supporting him in so many ways. And I'm crying and I'm like literally feeling the emotions that he's not even aware of or feeling. So this happens when we are highly sensitive children and we're just taking it all on and we are pushing it down, we're suppressing it and we're storing it and we're saving it for a rainy day, like a few decades later when we're on our journey of spirituality and healing and transformation and self-love. And we're like, yeah, we're going to become our higher selves. And it's like, yes, you are. But first, you're going to feel all of those suppressed emotions because that's what's going to allow you to actually be in alignment with that version of you. So that way you can unlearn everything that you were taught to believe about yourself and return to your truth. And this does not always feel like roses and rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. It often feels like you are dying. Which is kind of what I've been moving through. Now, since we are having a conversation about mental health, I do want to give a disclaimer and empower you to really take responsibility for where you are at. And as I'm referencing, it feels like you're dying. Like it does. If you've been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It could feel like a fucking roller coaster. But at the same time, if you are feeling concerns for your safety and if you are having any kind of suicidal thoughts or tendencies, please reach out to someone and make sure that you are safe. I dive deeper into my own personal journey of mental health in a previous episode of Dear Dumb Bitch, which was the podcast before Dear Goddess. This is the evolution. So if you are in a place where your emotions are just feeling so intense and you have concerns for yourself, please get support. But coming back to the dynamics of being an empath, often as children, learn to live in hypervigilance. And this is especially common if you grew up in a household that was perhaps chaotic or there was substance abuse. My dad struggles with alcoholism, and I didn't even realize how much that impacted me until I connected with my inner child and revisited some of those experiences. Childhood trauma doesn't mean that your parents don't love you. It doesn't mean you have bad parents. It just means that you have your own unique perspective of your childhood and your needs may not have been met in the way that you needed them. And when we grow up in households where we don't feel safe, either emotionally or physically or mentally, or there's chaos around us, we learn to live in hypervigilance and we become so hyper fixated and aware of not just what's happening around us, but also of the emotions and the energy of the people around us, especially our caregivers, which is oftentimes our parents. And this pattern of hypervigilance often stays with us. You may have noticed it in other relationships in your life, especially romantic relationships. And this was something that was so present for me when I was married, was really living constantly in hypervigilance and being so aware of the emotions of the man I was married to. We also co regulate to the people around us. And as children, we inherit our parents' nervous systems, specifically our mothers, because we share one nervous system in utero while our nervous system is developing. So we inherit our parents' nervous systems. And then we come out and we're co regulating with the people around us. And it's the ones that are most open and most sensitive that are often taking on the most chaos around them. So, coming back to the whole feeling lots of emotions, and I just want to acknowledge if you're in this season or you're just being a human and you're having a lot of emotions, that doesn't mean that you aren't healing. It actually means that you are, because you're probably meeting a lot of emotions that are not new. These are often not new emotions. They've been suppressed for a really long time and they're making their way up. And that right there is healing. I like to also use the pressure cooker example. So if you've ever seen a pressure cooker, I've never actually used one, but I kind of understand the premise of them. We're essentially pressure cookers, and you have the source of heat beneath the pressure cooker, and then you have the pressure cooker. And when the pressure builds up, you need to do something to release that pressure. And oftentimes we use different coping mechanisms to release the pressure. Maybe it's drinking, maybe it's smoking, maybe it's scrolling or shopping or exercising. Right? There's so many different coping mechanisms that we develop to manage and suppress those emotions. But when that pressure builds up, they have to go somewhere. And we try to manage the coping mechanisms, but really, we need to look at the heat, the source of what's creating all that pressure in the first place. And that's our wounding from the past. And in order to actually heal the wounds, we need to feel the emotions. So feeling your emotions doesn't mean you're not healing. It actually means that you are. But this does not mean drowning in them. And so often we just get overwhelmed with emotions and we're just like drowning in them. And that's actually looping in them, which is keeping us stuck. And this is also a reflection of being in wounded feminine energy. So if you aren't familiar with feminine and masculine energetics, welcome to this world. Life changing work for me. I love sharing and teaching about it. I have an entire program called Goddess Codes, which is a feminine embodiment and healing program. And we dive deep into healing our own inner feminine and inner masculine so we can create a divine, sacred union. And who doesn't want a divine, sacred inner union? That's the most divine and delicious relationship with yourself. But when we have patterns of wounded feminine energy, this is regardless of your gender. So, whatever gender you identify with, everyone has feminine energy and masculine energy. And most of the time, I'm just going to say it, it's most of the time because nobody teaches us this shit. But most of the time, we are either living in a pattern of wounded feminine energy or wounded masculine energy or some combination of the two. But This is not going to be a deep dive into masculine and feminine energetics. I'm just speaking to it from the lens of emotional regulation. When we are in a pattern of wounded feminine energy, we are often drowning in our emotions. Like, see a big giant ocean, and these oceans are your emotions, and you're just drowning in them. That's wounded feminine energy. Now, wounded masculine energy is the opposite. This is where you are closed off and avoidant to them, and you are just like, nope, we're not feeling there. They don't exist. You're suppressing them. So, there's a few pieces to this to actually really develop the skills of emotional regulation and emotional mastery. One of which is understanding your own masculine and feminine energetics and coming into a place of empowerment where your wounds are no longer dictating your behavior in life, and you are living from a place of truth rather than trauma, healing your relationship with your own inner feminine and inner masculine so you can develop a healthy relationship with your emotions. Imagine having a partner, having a man in your life who can actually hold you and be with you when you're having emotions. I don't know about you, but I didn't really have that growing up. I didn't have that in relationships in the past. So we're not even taught what that looks like. We don't know what that is like. So we need to develop it within ourselves in order to actually be able to experience it from another person. But imagine just being held and supported. They're not trying to fix you or make anything better. You're just allowing yourself to be witnessed and held and seen with love as you're navigating these emotions. And that's the divine masculine. So, building a healthy relationship with your own inner feminine and inner masculine and healing the underlying wounding and also healing your nervous system. Because if you do not have the capacity within your nervous system to be present with these big and intense emotions, then you aren't going to be able to really digest them and alchemize them. And when I say alchemize them, what I mean is that you don't really release emotions. You probably have heard that languaging used, especially if you're on Instagram and following accounts that talk about healing and if you got to release the emotions. And that's not actually what's happening. Because as we know, emotions are energy. They're just energy in motion. That's all it is. Sounds so simple, feels so complicated, but energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you're not taking that sadness or that anger or that grief and releasing it and getting rid of it. You can't destroy it. But what you can do is you alchemize it using your own life force energy, using love, using the frequency of love and compassion. And that's what allows it to change form into higher frequencies and ultimately coming into more life force energy. And you're taking those denser emotions that have been suppressed and really like fucking clogging up your shit. Remember, life just wants to flow through you, but it's coming into contact and being blocked by all of these densities and imprints that we're holding on to. So when we're actually able to alchemize it, life begins to flow. And that's such a delicious way of experiencing life. But we have to feel in order to get to that part. So we need the capacity within our nervous system in order to feel safe to actually do that. This is another thing that can feel quite abstract. So I want you to visualize a cup, something you drink out of, a cup. And I want you to imagine that this cup is like almost full to the top with water. So you have a little bit of space left. And this is going to represent and symbolize a dysregulated nervous system. So then you're living life and something stressful happens, as it often does in life, or you have some type of challenge, or maybe you have a breakup or some unexpected circumstance. And now you're pouring more water into the cup, right? Stress, heartbreak, work challenges, financial hardship. That cup is overflowing because there's no capacity to hold it. Now I want you to imagine another cup, and this time there's just like a little bit of water in the cup. It's like mostly an empty cup. This is a new twist on is the glass half full or half empty. So now you have this mostly empty cup and life is lifing. You're dumping some more water and there's stress, there's a heartbreak, there's this and there's that. But that water has some place to go because you have the capacity within your nervous system. It's not flooding all over the place. So you need to have the capacity within your nervous system to actually be able to be with and be present with and feel emotions when they're coming up, because if not, you're just going to be sent into states of dysregulation. And what is trauma? Trauma is too much, too fast, too soon for our nervous system to process. So we hold on to it, we create imprint, and there are loops that are not completed or closed. And it's a remembrance of an experience from the past. So what happens if we don't have the capacity within our nervous system and we're revisiting these emotions? Maybe we're even doing some really intense healing practices where there's all these cathartic releases. Well, if it's too much, too fast, too soon for our nervous system to be able to process and digest, we could potentially be crossing those thresholds of safety within ourselves and just re traumatizing ourselves. This is not about diving into the deep end and feeling all of the emotions at once when you've been suppressing for your entire life. That's not going to be supportive. That's not going to help you. Oftentimes, we apply the same patterns and programs that we need to heal from to our healing. Maybe it's being an overachiever and got to do it all and get it all done and prove our worth. And let's see how fast we're going to heal. And it's like, whoa, let's slow down. Like, let's take it easy. Let's begin to dip our toes into this land of feeling. So that way we can actually digest and process and transform and alchemize the emotions that we've been holding on to. So we need the capacity within our nervous system. We need to have the regulation in order to be with our emotions. We also need the emotional awareness. But this is something that I noticed within myself and something that I've noticed with pretty much every woman I've ever worked with. We begin to develop self awareness, which is such a beautiful thing. Awareness is always the first step to change because you cannot change what you aren't aware of. But as you have the awareness of emotions coming up, we oftentimes try to process what's happening in the moment. Well, what is this trigger about? And what's happening here? And oh, it's related to this and it's related to that. And feeling happens in the body, thinking happens in the mind. If you are in your head, that's called thinking. That's not feeling. And oftentimes we think that we're feeling, but we're actually thinking and we're trying to process in the moment and we're just looping in our emotions, which is actually making them tighter and we're getting more stuck in them. And there's nothing wrong here. There's nothing to fix. You haven't been doing it wrong. This is about refinement and actually learning how to feel and how to support yourself and how to actually be a human because we're not taught how to be humans. We're not taught emotional mastery. In fact, I would say most of society does not want us to have emotional mastery. Do you know why? Because we live in a reality where there are corporations that make billions, yes, billions with a B, billions of dollars from us being dysregulated, from us buying things to try to cope and numb and distract. So it makes sense that we're not taught any of this. But if you want to live in your fullest potential and live in your highest timeline, then emotional mastery and regulation is a non negotiable because otherwise you're always going to be a victim to your emotions. You're going to be reacting to them rather than creating the space to be with them so you can respond to them and to understand what they are teaching you. Emotions are just messengers. We live in this state of being a victim to our nervous system without knowing how to actually regulate it and how to actually support ourselves. So, what happens so often is we have the self awareness of what's happening and we're trying to process it and we're just looping. And it's like, but I'm feeling. And it's like, yeah, a beautiful effort, but you're not actually feeling because feeling happens in the body. Another reason this happens is because the mind tries to solve the problems of the heart. And the mind views those big, heavy, intense emotions as problems. Really? There's no problem. There's no problem here. Emotions are not problems to be solved. They are meant to be felt and experienced. But if we don't feel safe to actually experience them and feel them, then the mind says, nope, this is not okay. We need to fix this problem. And we disconnect from our heart. We disconnect from the body, which actually cockblocks our healing because remember, we were discussing how emotions are energy in motion. And energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. And we transmute and change form of our emotions through our own life force energy and the frequency of love. So if we're disconnected from our heart, we're disconnected from our body, we're disconnected from our own love, we're thinking our emotions in our mind, what do you think is happening? Not a whole lot. We're just continuing to suppress and push them down. So the mind is always going to try to solve the problems of the heart. And as women, if you identify as being a woman, we are meant to be in our bodies. We are meant to feel. We are sensual beings. But if we're disconnected from our body, we're disconnected from our feminine essence and our true feminine power. So really, there's no problem. And you're not doing it wrong. You're doing it the way you have been taught. And now, perhaps, you are learning that there are new ways to actually feel and experience your emotions. This is where somatic coaching and somatic healing comes in. I remember when I first started working with a somatic coach, it was back in 2022. It was probably May or June of 2022. I didn't know I was working with a somatic coach. I thought I was working with a life coach because I had all of these goals and I had this vision and I felt like I kept getting in my own way. I felt like I was self sabotaging and I was like, I feel like I keep running into something and I'm like, it's me. I just cannot get out of my own way. So I'm like, I'm going to work with a life coach and we're going to get all my goals done. And then we're on these sessions and he's like telling me to feel. And I'm like, I don't have time to feel. Did you not just hear me tell you I have goals and I have things to do? And he's like, this is exactly why we're feeling. And I had to practice feeling and creating presence in my body because I was so numb and so disconnected. I literally felt numb from the neck down. But somatic healing felt like the missing pieces of the puzzle for my own personal journey, which is why I decided to get my certification in it and become a trauma informed somatic coach specializing in the female nervous system, not just to deepen my own practice and journey, but to be able to share this work and to support other women on their own journey. Because let me tell you, this whole feeling your emotions thing changes your life, not just in the sense that you're no longer holding on to all of the shit from the past, but because you get to feel it all and you can only feel as high as you're willing to go low. The depth of pleasure that you can feel when you're willing to meet and experience all of these parts of yourself is beyond what I can even put into words. But this is what it means to truly feel alive. Now, if you are desiring support and you are looking to understand and heal your nervous system and to set yourself free from the past on deeper levels, so you can actually create a life that feels so fucking good and just turns you on and become the woman that you know you're meant to be, then click the link in the show notes to learn more about how my coaching can support you. But I also want to leave you with just a bit of a framework for you to use when you perhaps feel triggered or you have a lot of emotions coming up. So, the first thing is to always acknowledge the emotion and your body. How often have you felt anxiety? How often have you felt sadness or any other emotion that perhaps you didn't really want to feel? And it's like, this isn't what I really want to deal with right now. And I don't know how to deal with this. We're just going to push through it. We're just going to get rid of it. And it's like, it's not going anywhere. You're literally just sweeping shit under a rug. There's a big giant lump in the middle of it. It's like, you're not fooling anyone. Now you're just tiptoeing around the big lump in the rug, trying not to hit it and pretending like it's not there. Now we have to acknowledge the emotions and acknowledge our body. Thank you. Thank you. And also, I believe you. I believe that this is what you're feeling. I believe that this is the experience that you're having. This is not the time to try to figure out why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. That's pulling you into your head. There's a time and a place to process and understand and analyze. It's not in the moment. We have to feel it somatically. Now, there are caveats to this. So if you are, let's just say, at your workplace and you're having this big trigger and emotional reaction, yeah, you might need to maybe go into the bathroom or take a break in order to do this, right? So use some judgment here because maybe right at your office or cubicle, or I don't know, I haven't worked in a traditional job in more than a few years. I don't know what the workplace is like anymore, but yeah, you might not be able to go into like your full somatic experience right then and there, but our emotions are not things to be put on a to do list. It's not like, you know what, emotion? It's Monday and there's some sadness coming up. Thank you. I believe you. I understand. Like you're here and I want to hold space for you, but Thursday, you're going on Thursday's list. Like, no, that's really how we destroy trust within ourselves and just create more havoc on our nervous system. But being able to be present with it somatically in your body and from a lens of curiosity and curious about the experience. It's more than where do I feel it in my body? I mean, well, you can start there, but there's so much more. And remember, this is not about just like drowning in the emotion either. You need to titrate to the experience to be able to create safety and feeling. And ultimately, remember that you are not the emotion, you are the awareness of it. Here's another visual for you because when I first heard that, I was like, yeah, I don't quite get it. So imagine that you are standing on a bridge and beneath that bridge is a river. Sometimes it's like a really tranquil, slow flowing river. Sometimes it's like white water rapids. The river beneath you represents your emotions. Now you're on the bridge, you're watching it all. So you're not the water, you're not the river, you're not the emotions, you're the observer of them. But without that separation, without that self awareness, without that capacity within your nervous system, you're fucking in the river. You're in the white water rapids and you don't have a raft and you're just getting slung around and like slamming into rocks. And it's rough. It's painful. You feel like you're drowning. Yeah, that's the opposite of emotional regulation and emotional mastery. Being able to stand on the bridge, let the emotions run through you without running you over is. And it actually can become a very pleasurable experience. I have felt some of the deepest pleasure as I've been diving into my body and exploring the depths of my being, the depths of myself, touching the edges of grief and sadness and meeting parts of myself that have been suppressed and hidden and being able to open up and hold space for them. It can be a very pleasurable experience when you're really in your body, but there's a journey to get there and the journey continues because the journey never ends because this is life and we signed up for it. And if you are on this path of healing, of evolution, like there's no turning back. I was joking with a friend the other day and I was like, yeah, I didn't know that this is like what I was signing up for when I wanted to create my soul led business and I was going on this path of healing and all the things. I'm like, I didn't know this is what I signed up for. But whether you know this is what you signed up for or not, you did. Your soul sign on the dotted line. This is written in your soul contract. So you can resist it all that you want. We do have this really beautiful thing called free will, which can make life really fucking interesting at times. But ultimately, once you see it, once you see your path, there's no turning back. And I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to. So even though I am in the depths of it right now, because as I'm feeling, there's more to feel. Imagine kitchen cabinet or your closet, and you just have so much in there. It's like every item you've ever owned your entire life is packed into that cabinet. And you're afraid to open up that cabinet. You're afraid to open up that closet because it's like, whoa, I don't even know what's in there, but like that just feels overwhelming. But also, it's really heavy and I want to get new things, but there's no space for them. And I can't even find any of the things I want to use because it's all just packed and shoved in there. So you got to open it up. You got to see what's there. Got to start to take things out. And as you take things out, you create space and new things come through. So as you are navigating emotions and your inner landscape, things begin to shift around. And as things shift around, it creates space for new things to come up. And the journey just continues. So I am celebrating you for being on this journey. I am honored to be on this journey with you. And if you enjoyed this episode or if it resonated with you, share it with a friend or someone else who might enjoy it. Leave a review of the show, and I would love to hear from you. Send me a message on Instagram. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was. Let me know what you're moving through. I love connecting and hearing from you. So send me a message. I'm sending you so much love, and I'll see you next week.